Just like last week, my footage for this week kind of got eaten too because of resolution improper things with the settings, and doing video editing can be pretty trying sometimes. But in any case, I decided I'd show you guys what I came up with for the video regardless, even though there's not going to be much text writing in or anything. You're not going to be able to see any mistakes being made or whatnot. Basically, what I came up with today was for the power-ups, as well as the upgrade system. Now, the power-ups in the game are going to come in technically 3 flavors. There's going to be the usable power-ups, which are the ones that apply to the stacked or energized system. There's going to be the instant power-ups, which also includes the weapons, but it also includes things like shield points, extra lives, and even multipliers and missiles. But then there's also going to be missile packs. See, if you pick up a normal missile power-up, like the normal kind of power-up, it'll provide 8 missiles and will change your current missile type to whatever that particular missile power-up is. But the missile packs are always dropped in sort of 2 or 4 packs, and they sort of match whatever missiles you have. And those are going to be a lot more common. Now, one of the tricks I had to address when I was coming up with the power-ups here is the drop rates, because there's going to be 4 different kinds of enemies, and I wanted to make sure that the drop rates sort of made sense. You don't want the player to grab tons of power-ups, but you also want to make sure that they get a decent variety. So this actually came down to a couple sets of odds here. The first is based on what kind of enemy you've destroyed. The normal enemies are going to have pretty low chance to drop power-ups of most types, but they still have a good chance for dropping missile packs. The tough enemies are just 4 times better overall. And then the large enemies, they don't drop the missile packs, and they don't have a good chance for dropping instant power-ups, but they do have a good chance for dropping usable power-ups. In fact, they have a really good chance for dropping usable power-ups. But something to keep in mind is that you generally don't fight more than 1 to 4 large enemies per level, at least until the later parts of the game, so that's not going to be too huge a deal. And then with the instant power-ups, I also had to make sure that they came out in sort of relative amounts that made sense. Like, weapons need to be common, because you need the weapons in order to power yourself up. But the other power-ups, they really shouldn't be that common. The missiles, in fact, are going to be half as common as the weapons. Shields and multipliers will be half as common as the missiles, and then extra lives are just going to be super rare. But then I also had to come up with the usable power-ups themselves. And I decided, for sake of the password system and for sake of my own sanity, that there'd be a limit of 8 of them. And so I came up with 8 usable power-ups that seemed to have a good variation on what they could do. One of them is going to be a flash power-up, which clears the screen of normal enemies and bullets. There's going to be a doubler, which doubles your firing rate and does the damage you do. There's going to be a time stopper, which can stop all enemies in place so that you can shoot them down more easily. There's going to be a power-up that makes you immune to all damage for just a short period of time. There's going to be a neutralize power-up, which permanently prevents any of the enemies that are currently on the screen, except for bosses, from firing their weapons. Any new enemies that come on the screen, they'll be able to, but all the enemies presently on screen, no more weapon shots from them. There's going to be a recover power-up that gives you a point of shielding, but it can also be used to recover your regenerative shields if they're down. There's going to be an explosives power-up, which just causes random enemies to just blow up. It's very, very straightforward to that one. However, this brought up an interesting thing. You don't want to dump everything on the player all at once. You want to make sure that the player is introduced to things gradually. That way, there's a reason for them to keep going in a sense. So, to that end, I started putting together the progression on the power-ups here, making sure that I sort of understood like which power-ups were going to come later in the game. So of the usable power-ups, the explosives, the time stop, and the hyper beam, you can't get them immediately. You have to be past a certain level in order to find those. But then that sort of extended into a level progression that I put together, so that I could also put normal weapons behind this progression as well. For instance, the laser weapon doesn't show up until level 6 or later, or the 4 missile medium packs don't show up until level 11 or later. The only thing is, I kind of got stuck on level 81. I'm not really sure what to put there. And I tried coming up with stuff, but I ultimately gave up and decided I'll figure it out later. The last thing I put together today was the upgrades. See, what's going to happen is every time you defeat a boss, you're going to be allowed to upgrade your ship. You'll have 8 different things you can upgrade, and they can each be upgraded 2 times. The first level is the base level, and it shows up as a blue number underneath the upgrade button. Once you've upgraded it, it becomes a green number, and once you've upgraded it a second time, it becomes a yellow number. I thought about having a red level of upgrade, and I might still do that as sort of a secret to the password system, but I'm still on the fence on it. And it really does come down to how much data do we need to store in the passwords. So once I have all of the necessary information figured out to start working on the password system, we can sort of get to that point. But for now, there's only the 3 upgrade levels: base, 1 upgrade, and 2 upgrades. And these can be applied to the weapon systems, which changes what the limits are. This can be applied to the shield system, which again applies to the limit on charges or the regeneration time. There's the power-ups, which increases the power-up stack size or reduces how many enemies you have to destroy to recharge the rechargeable power-ups. You can upgrade the missile system so that you can fire multiple missiles simultaneously. There's also a safety system, which basically is post-hit invincibility. There's an effect system, which affects how powerful the power-ups are when you use them. There's a speed system so that you can increase how fast you move. And then there's also a damping system. And this is basically your ship puts out this damping field to make the enemies move slower. As you can see, it's not a huge effect, but believe it or not, even that small an amount will have an effect on how the player perceives the movement of the enemies.